welcome to MKX for beginners by a beginner. The goal of these videos is to help improve our overall skills in Mortal Kombat X and go from being a newbie to intermediate and then higher levels of skills down the line. This is the first video tutorial, and for it we'll be talking about control setup. Now, what control system you use can vary by preference. It could be a gamepad, a fight stick, or a hitbox like myself. We'll talk about that later in the video, but for now, what we're going to talk about are the three buttons at the bottom of the control setup here. These buttons are release check, alternate control, and input shortcut. Release check really screws with the execution of combos and special moves, as a button that is pressed with it on counts as being pressed when you push it and when you release it, causing extra inputs which can cause advanced moves and combos to come out wrong, so we're going to turn this off. Alternate control makes moves require diagonal inputs. If you've ever played a game like Street Fighter and done a quarter circle move, like Hadouken, you know there is a diagonal down arrow in between down and forward. In MKX, you just need to press down and forward in order to shoot out something like a Hadouken. Having the setting on makes you have to have that additional diagonal input in there in order to make it work. Essentially, it makes things more complex for us and harder to pull off, therefore, you should leave it off and not turn it on. Finally, we have input shortcuts, which I'm not completely sure on being needed at all. It just makes moves take less precision, which is a handicap in my opinion. We're here to get better, not rely on a crutch. I might change my mind about this later on, but for now, let's leave it off. After making these changes, you can go down to Save Presets and confirm. Next up, I'll be talking about setting up my fight stick and button layouts. What matters the most is finding a setup that's right for you. If you already have one, feel free to move on to the next video, where we'll be talking about starter characters and going over the movesets and more for them. If you want to know more about fight stick setup, stay around because I'll be going over that next. At the top, you'll see it says Custom 1. There are up to 4 custom presets you can change your controls to work with. These can come in handy if you have friends over and everyone has different setups. It gives you each the ability to have a unique custom setup without interfering to others. Now, onto button layout. The default settings work pretty good for a gamepad or controller, however, in my opinion, if you're using a fight stick or a hitbox, they stink. So I'm going to show you what I do for my setup and explain a little bit about why I do it. First and most important thing to change in my opinion is the location of back punch and the back kick button. We do this in order to activate supers in the game. You have to have a handy block key nearby, and currently it's not set very conveniently. We'll be setting the original button to back punch and back kick to block. The control setup should look something like this on a fight stick now. Then I move flip stance and interact to new buttons, as you can see here. Interact I set to be the bottom rightmost button on a stick. Flip stance I set to be one of the side buttons, as there's literally no reason to use it. It can be triggered by pressing both back kick and front kick at the same time. It does the flip stance move. You need flip stance in order to do an X-ray by pressing block and flip stance at the same time. However, by pressing both kicks at the same time plus blocks, you can achieve this. It's essentially the same as an ultra move in Street Fighter 4 when you're pressing all 3 primary kick buttons at the same time. Or in this case, both kicks and blocks to activate it. For now, this is my default setup, and I really like it, although I'm starting to consider a few new changes here and there to make things a little more efficient. Feel free to play around and see what works for you. As I mentioned earlier, in the next lesson, we'll be covering new characters for beginners to go over and learn the game with and movesets for them. I'll see you then. Please be sure to subscribe and follow for future videos. And most importantly, let's get better at this game together.